The exomoon of Typhon 4 was a world holding its breath. It was a place of fragile, terrifying beauty, where gravity pulled with a gentle hand, and the atmosphere was a suspension of bioluminescent spores that drifted like eternal glowing snow. The research habitat, a sleek geometric blister of glass and composite-reinforced steel, sat on the edge of a frozen methane ocean. Inside, the air smelled of ozone and recycled coffee, the hum of servers providing a rhythmic heartbeat to the lives of 23 scientists. It was the final hour, though none of them knew it. Dr. Eris Thorne sat at his workstation, rubbing eyes that felt filled with sand. On the holographic display in front of him, strings of alien mathematics unspooled like golden thread. It was elegant, it was impossible. It was the kind of discovery that made a man feel small and infinite all at once. Behind him, the break room carried the muffled sounds of celebration. Someone had opened a bottle of synthetic wine. There was laughter, the sound of glass clinking, the tired hope of people who had spent 3 years staring into the dark and finally saw a light blinking back. Eris reached out to touch the data core sitting on his desk. It was a black prism, no larger than a human heart, its surface drinking the lab lights without reflecting them. It looked heavy, but it weighed nothing. The breach did not come with an explosion. There were no alarms. There was no shaking of the floor plates. The silence was the weapon. The air pressure in the main corridor dropped imperceptibly as the seal was cut. Eris frowned, glancing at the environmental readout. Before his brain could process the anomaly, the slaughter began. They moved like liquid smoke. They were tall, armored in suits that did not reflect light but devoured it, creating humanoid voids in the visual field, phase blades, humming with a frequency just beyond human hearing. Slid through the blast doors as if the metal were wet paper. Eris stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. That scrape was the loudest sound in the universe because the screaming did not happen. He watched through the glass partition of his lab as a shadow detached itself from the wall near the break room. It moved with a grace that made the human eye water, a geometry of violence that was too perfect to be natural. A security officer raised a rifle. The shadow flickered. The rifle fell in 2 pieces. The officer opened his mouth to shout, to warn the others, but the assassin raised a gauntleted hand. A neural silencer triggered. The officer's face went slack, his vocal cords paralyzed, his brainstem severed from the impulse to panic. He crumpled without a sound. Then the shadows were everywhere. It was surgical. It was an erasure. The scientists in the break room died with their wine glasses still in their hands. The assassins moved among them, blades flashing with a violet ionization, cutting life threads with efficient indifference. There was no malice in it, which made it worse. It was just housekeeping. Eris scrambled backward, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He grabbed the black prism. He had to hide it. They were here for this. He knew it with a certainty that froze his blood. This was not a raid for supplies. This was a sanitization protocol. He sprinted for the rear of the lab, toward the cryo-storage vault. His breath hitched in his throat. He punched the code into the keypad with trembling fingers. The heavy door hissed open, releasing a cloud of white vapor. Footsteps, not the heavy bootfalls of soldiers, but the soft, wet click of organic tech on metal. They were close. Eris shoved the black prism behind a rack of unstable isotopes, wedging it into the insulation foam where a scanner might mistake it for shielding material. He slammed the vault door shut and spun around, back pressed against the cold metal. The lab door slid open. The assassin stood there. It was 7 feet tall, its helmet a smooth, featureless curve of obsidian. The armor shifted like oil, mimicking the colors of the lab behind it. Eris could feel the intelligence radiating from it, cold and sharp as a scalpel. "Who are you?" Eris whispered, the words trembling. The assassin did not answer. It stepped forward, raising a weapon that looked like a shard of crystallized void. Eris closed his eyes. He thought of the math. He thought of the golden thread unspooling in the dark. The silence took him. 3 days later, Earth wept rain that tasted of sulfur and iron. In the sprawl of Neo-Seattle, the gargoyles were neon corporate logos bleeding light into the gutter. The news feeds were plastered on every surface, the sides of maglev trains, the retinas of passers-by, the damp pavement itself. The headlines were unified, sanitized, and tragically hollow. Catastrophic failure at outpost Typhon. Oxygen recycler malfunction cited. 23 souls lost. Elias Rain watched the scrolling text from a booth in the back of a noodle shop that smelled of burnt garlic and exhaust. He was a man who looked like he was fading out of the photograph. His coat was a nondescript gray, his hair the color of wet asphalt, and his face a map of sharp angles and old exhaustion. He had the eyes of someone who had seen the machinery of the world and wished he hadn't. He was a ghost. Officially, Elias Rane had died 6 years ago in a shuttle crash over the Martian equator. Before that, he had been a name whispered in officers' clubs and intelligence briefings, a troubleshooter who fixed problems that treaties could not resolve. Now, he was just a guy eating noodles in the rain. A man in a beige raincoat slid into the booth opposite him. The man was dry, despite the downpour outside. He smelled of antiseptic and expensive fabric softener. "You look terrible, Elias," the man said. "And you look like a tax audit," Elias replied, not looking up from his bowl. "Go away, Vance. I'm retired. I'm dead. Pick one." "The narrative is flimsy," Vance said, tapping the table where the newsfeed was projected. "Oxygen recycler malfunction. The public buys it because the public is tired. They want to believe the universe is just dangerous, not malicious." Elias paused, his chopsticks halfway to his mouth. "Typhon 4. I saw it." "You saw the lie," Vance corrected. "The telemetry from the station didn't show a pressure drop until after the biosigns flatlined. All of them, simultaneously." Elias set the chopsticks down. The hunger was gone, replaced by a familiar cold itch in the center of his chest. "That's not an accident. That's a hit." "A wipe," Vance said softly. "Clean. Professional. Alien." Elias looked out the window at the rain slicing through the neon. "So send the Marines, send the Void Navy, and why are you talking to a corpse?" "Because the Navy has flags," Vance said, "and the Marines have rules of engagement, and the Security Council is terrified. If we admit that a foreign power entered our space and butchered our scientists, we have to go to war. The economy collapses, the treaties burn, we lose." Vance slid a small data chip across the scarred table. "Alien assassins wiped out a research team," Vance said, his voice dropping to a murmur that was louder than the thunder outside. "Earth sent an operator with no chain of command." Elias looked at the chip. It was black, unmarked. "No chain of command," he repeated. "No flag," Vance said. "No extraction, no support. If you get caught, you're a looter. If you die, you stay dead. You have one directive. Find out who ordered the hit and bring back what the scientists found." "And if I find out it was one of us?" Elias asked, his eyes locking onto Vance's. Vance didn't flinch. "Then you burn them too." Elias picked up the chip. It felt cold against his skin. "I need a ship, and I need a caliber that doesn't exist on the civilian market." "Already arranged," Vance said, standing up. Welcome back to the land of the living, Elias. Try not to make a mess. Deep in the void between stars, where the light of suns was just a rumor, the carrier ship's silent hymn drifted. It was a vessel of the Ethelgard Empire, a thing of bone-white ceramic and organic curves, looking less like a ship and more like the rib cage of a leviathan. Vesper knelt on the floor of the meditation chamber. Her armor was stripped away, revealing skin the color of twilight, faint bioluminescent markings tracing the path of her lymphatic system. She was beautiful in the way a thunderstorm is beautiful, striking, powerful, and inherently dangerous. Her eyes were solid pools of silver, currently clouded with a rare turbulence. She washed her hands in a basin of sonic water, the vibrations scrubbing the microscopic residue of blood from her skin. But she could still feel it. The Typhon mission had been standard: infiltrate, eliminate, sanitize. But something was wrong. The humans had not been soldiers. They had been soft, confused things holding glassware, and the order to execute them had come with a strange urgency, a desperation that did not fit the calculated rhythms of the High Court. Vesper. The voice came from the shadows. She did not startle. She stood, turning gracefully to face the entrance. High Archon Kalen stood there, his robes shimmering with digital weaves. He was old. His twilight skin faded to a dusty gray, but his eyes were sharp. "The task is complete," Vesper said, her voice a melodic contralto that seemed to vibrate in the air. "The station is silent." "And the object?" Kalen asked. "The vault was sealed," Vesper lied. It was a smooth lie, one she had prepared on the flight back. "The explosive charges we set to sanitize the facility would have vaporized any containment units." She had not set charges. She had left the station intact, a loose end, a question mark. Kalen studied her. He moved closer, the scent of ozone and incense clinging to him. "There is a rumor," he said softly. "A transmission that may have leaked before your team breached the perimeter. A witness signal." "Impossible," Vesper said. "The neural silencers were effective immediately." "Nevertheless," Kalen said, "rumors are dangerous. They are seeds. If they grow, they can topple pillars." He placed a hand on her shoulder. His fingers were cold. "You are my finest instrument, Vesper. You do not ask why the blade cuts, you simply cut." "I serve the court," she recited, the words tasting like ash. "Good," Kalen said. "Return to the sector. Monitor the wreckage. If any scavengers approach, human or otherwise, eliminate them. And Vesper? Yes, Archon? If you find evidence that anyone within our own circle communicated with the humans prior to the strike," Kalen whispered, leaning in close, "you do not report it to the council. You bring that information only to me." Vesper watched him leave. The door hissed shut, leaving her alone with the sonic basin. The order was a fracture in the code. Report only to me. That was not the way of the court. The court was a unity. Secrets between archons were treason. She looked at her hands. They were clean, but they felt heavy. She had been engineered to be a weapon. Her empathy gene spliced out of her helix before she was decanted from the birth tank. Yet, as she remembered the face of the human scientist just before the end, she felt a phantom sensation in her chest, a tightness, a defect. She put her armor back on, the helmet sealed with a hiss, hiding the doubt behind a mask of obsidian. Typhon 4 was a graveyard of ghosts. Elias Ron moved through the shattered airlock of the research station. He wore a salvage rig, bulky, industrial, battered enough to pass a casual inspection but lined with military-grade kinetic gel. The air inside the station was gone, vented to the thin atmosphere, so the silence was absolute. He activated his magnetic boots, the heavy thud-thud-thud vibrating up his shins as he walked down the main corridor. His helmet's heads-up display painted the world in wireframes and thermal ghosts. The bodies were still there. The cold had preserved them perfectly. Elias knelt beside a security guard. He examined the weapon on the floor. It had been sliced in half. The cut was molecularly smooth. Phase tech, he muttered to himself. High-end, not black market. He moved deeper. The floating spores from the outside had drifted in through the breaches, coating the dead in a layer of glowing dust. It gave the massacre a religious quality, like saints preserved in a reliquary. He reached the main lab. This was the kill zone. He could read the flow of the battle, or rather, the execution. There were no scorch marks on the walls from missed shots, no signs of panic fire. The attackers had moved in a funnel formation, driving the targets into the open. Elias scanned the room. His specialized sensor suite, illegally modified and highly temperamental, picked up the faint isotopic decay of the attackers' energy signatures. Signature unknown, origin non-terrestrial. Tell me something I don't know, Elias grumbled. He walked to the far wall where a console had been slagged. He pulled a multi-tool from his belt and pried open the maintenance panel. He was looking for the hardline backups, the dumb data that couldn't be wiped remotely. As he worked, his light caught something embedded in the wall near the door frame. He paused. He used tweezers to extract it. It was a tiny fragment of metal, no bigger than a fingernail clipping. It had sheared off something during an impact. Elias held it up to his faceplate, magnifying the image. Stamped into the microscopic grain of the metal was a serial number and a manufacturer's mark. Aerodyne Systems, Terra Prime. Elias felt a chill that had nothing to do with the freezing methane outside. This was a piece of an actuator motor, the kind used in stealth exoskeletons. The assassins were alien. The tech was alien. But one of them, or someone working with them, was wearing gear maintained with Earth parts. Collaboration, Elias whispered. Impossible. The aliens considered humans to be noisy, resource-hungry children. They didn't trade military tech. They didn't run joint ops. Unless the objective was so valuable that ideology went out the window. He pocketed the fragment. He had his proof of betrayal. Now he needed the core, 5 kilometers away, perched on a ridge of jagged ice that overlooked the research station. Vesper lay prone. Her optical camouflage blended her perfectly with the frozen landscape. To the naked eye, she was just another shadow on the ice. Through the scope of her long-range rail rifle, she watched the figure moving inside the station. He was clumsy. That was her first thought. He moved with the heavy, plodding gait of a human in a salvage suit. He stopped to look at the bodies. He tinkered with the walls. Scavenger, she murmured. Her finger tightened on the trigger. It would be an easy shot. 1 round, hyper-accelerated, punching through the station wall in his suit. He would be dead before the sound reached him. But then she hesitated. He wasn't looting. He hadn't taken the watches or the personal tablets from the dead. He wasn't stripping the copper from the walls. He was investigating. She zoomed in. She saw him extract the fragment from the wall. She saw the way he held it, the way he scanned it. Not a scavenger, she corrected herself. He was hunting. A small smile touched her lips beneath the helmet. It was an expression she rarely used. Earth had sent a hunter, a single, solitary hunter to a world where a squad had been wiped out in seconds. Amusing, she whispered. They sent a shadow to hunt a shadow. She lowered the rifle. Killing him now would be efficient, but it would yield no answers. If he was here, he knew something. And if he knew something, He might lead her to the rot inside her own order. She stood up, her cloak rippling as it adjusted to the movement. She would let him run. For a little while. Elias found the cryo vault. It was in the back of the lab, hidden behind a rack of unstable chemicals. The keypad was dead, the electronics fried by an EMP burst, likely from the initial assault. He didn't bother with hacking. He attached a localized shaped charge to the hinges. 3, 2, 1. The explosion was a dull thump in the vacuum. The heavy door fell inward, clanging against the metal floor. Elias stepped through the smoke, his flashlight cutting through the gloom. The vault was small, lined with frost. It was empty. He swept the light across the shelves. Nothing. No black prism. No data core. Just the indentation in the insulation foam where it had been. "Damn it," Elias hissed. He leaned in closer. There was something etched into the foam, scratched hastily, perhaps with a stylus or a fingernail, coordinates, and a symbol. It was a jagged circle with a line through it, the symbol of the smuggler's moon, Oakhaven. Someone had been here before him, or the scientist had moved it before he died. Elias straightened up, his mind racing. The mission had just gone from a retrieval op to a chase. He wasn't the only one looking for the core. High above, in the cockpit of her scout ship, Vesper intercepted a signal. It wasn't a broadcast. It was a ghost transmission, a packet of data bouncing off the station's automated distress buoy. It was a fragmented audio file, encrypted with a cipher that was childishly simple for her onboard AI to break. She played it. The voice was breathless, terrified. It was the human scientist. "Dr. Thorne, if anyone finds this, the math isn't just energy, it's language. We opened a door we didn't see. The prism, it connects to the deep network. It controls the gates, all of them. Whoever holds this can shut down the trade routes. They can starve whole systems. They can end empires without firing a shot. I hid it. God forgive me. I hid it." Vesper sat back in her pilot's chair. The silence of the cockpit felt heavy. End empires without firing a shot. That was why the kill order had been given. That was why the humans were dead. Her people, the Ethel Guard, relied on the trade gates for their economy. If Earth controlled the gates, the Empire would be on its knees in a month. But if the Empire controlled them... She looked down at the thermal image of the human operator leaving the station below. He was getting into a small, unmarked shuttle. He didn't have the core. She knew that because her scanners showed no energy spike. He was following a trail. Vesper engaged her thrusters. The silent hymn decloaked for a microsecond, a shimmer of silver in the black, before vanishing into warp. She would follow him. She would let him find the core, and then she would take it, not for the Archon who whispered of betrayal, and not for the Empire that viewed her as a tool. She would take it because she needed to know if a weapon could choose not to fire. The game had begun. Oakhaven Station was not a place where people went to be found. It was a tumor of rusted steel and stolen polymers clinging to the side of a dead asteroid in the rim territories. It smelled of recycled sweat, ozone, and frying synth meat. It was the sort of place where gravity was a subscription service, and morality was a luxury nobody could afford. Elias Rane moved through the crowds of the lower bazaar like a shark swimming through a reef of bottom feeders. He had ditched the salvage rig for a heavy leather coat that concealed the kinetic gel armor woven into his undersuit. His face was set in a bored, predatory scowl that discouraged eye contact. Around him, the black market was in full swing. Stalls made of corrugated plastic sold everything from military-grade optics to vat-grown organs that twitched in jars of amber fluid. A vendor with 3 cybernetic eyes was haggling over a canister of illegal memories, the raw, unfiltered sensory recordings of someone else's adrenaline high. Elias wasn't here for memories. He was here for a name. He stopped at a booth tucked into a dripping alcove. The proprietor was a Tellarite, a squat, toad-like humanoid cleaning a plasma pistol with a dirty rag. "I'm looking for a broker," Elias said, leaning against the stanchion, "who goes by the name of Silas, deals in high-value data retrieval." The Tellarite didn't look up. "Silas is dead. Airlock accident. Tragic. Go away. Bounty hunter." Elias picked up a jagged piece of scrap metal from the counter and toyed with it. "I am not a bounty hunter. Bounty hunters have licenses. They have rules. They have to file paperwork when they break fingers." He dropped the scrap. It made a heavy, dull sound. "I am just a man on a schedule, and you are wasting my time." The Tellarite paused. He looked at Elias's hands, scarred, steady, and resting dangerously close to the pistol on his hip. "Silas has a back room at the 0G transit hub," the Tellarite grunted, pointing with a greasy thumb. "Sector 7. If he is not there, he is likely selling his mother to the organ banks." "See?" Elias smiled, a dry, humorless expression. "Civility costs nothing." He turned and walked away, the crowd parting around him. He checked the time on his wrist unit. 6 hours since he landed. The trail was getting warm. The coordinates from the cryo vault had led him here, to the armpit of the galaxy. If the core was on this station, it was likely already being auctioned off to the highest bidder. He needed to move faster. Vesper stepped out of the airlock and onto the main promenade of Oakhaven. She was not wearing her armor. Armor drew attention. Instead, she wore a long coat of dark, shimmering weave that flowed around her like liquid smoke, cut high at the collar to hide the bioluminescent markings on her neck. Her hair was pulled back in a severe, intricate braid, and her silver eyes were hidden behind polarized lenses. Even without the armor, she changed the physics of the room. As she walked through the bazaar, the noise level dropped. Smugglers mid-shout lowered their voices. Pickpockets unconsciously pulled their hands back. It was an instinctual reaction to a predator. She moved with a fluidity that made the humans around her look like they were wading through mud. Every step was a calculation, every glance a target acquisition. She smelled the fear in the air. It tasted like copper. Her mission parameters were shifting. The Archon's secret order, report only to me, burned in her mind like a fever. She had tracked the human operator's ion trail to this rock. He was here. And if he was here, the core was here. She passed a stall selling avian exotics. The birds in the cages went silent as she passed. She paused. Her auditory implants filtered the cacophony of the station, isolating specific frequencies. She heard the grind of gears, the hiss of hydraulics, the murmur of 1,000 illicit deals. And then she heard a voice she recognized from the intercepted recording. "Sector 7. If he is not there." She turned her head slightly. 200 meters away, moving toward the transit lifts. She saw him. The operator. He walked with a deceptive slouch, but his center of gravity was perfect. He was scanning the upper gantries, checking his corners. He was good. For a human. Vesper slipped through the crowd, her movements effortless. She did not shove people aside. She simply occupied the space where they weren't, flowing through the gaps like water. She would take him in the transit zone. Less collateral damage, fewer witnesses to silence. The 0G transit hub was a long, cylindrical corridor running through the spine of the asteroid. The gravity plating here was disabled to allow heavy cargo crates to be moved with minimal energy. The air was thick with dust and the hum of ventilation fans. Elias floated through the center of the corridor, gripping the handholds spaced along the walls to pull himself forward. It was quiet here. Too quiet. He felt the prickle on the back of his neck a second before the attack came. He kicked off the wall, twisting in midair just as a throwing knife sparked against the metal where his head had been. Elias grabbed a floating handle and swung himself behind a drifting cargo container. "Friendly greeting," he shouted, drawing his heavy pistol. "You could have just asked for a date." Vesper landed on the opposite wall, her boots magnetic. She crouched upside down, defying orientation. She had discarded the coat. Beneath it, she wore a combat skin suit that showed the terrifying musculature of her species. "Surrender the location of the core," she said. Her voice was calm, resonant, echoing in the metal tube. "And your death will be painless." "I was hoping for hello," Elias muttered. He fired 2 shots. The rounds were subsonic, designed not to puncture the hull. Vesper didn't even flinch. She simply wasn't there anymore. She pushed off the wall with explosive force, twisting through the air like a drilled screw. Elias cursed and pushed himself away from the crate, sending himself tumbling toward the floor, or what passed for the floor. Vesper collided with the crate, her momentum denting the steel. She used the impact to launch herself at him again. This time, she connected. They collided in the center of the corridor, a tangle of limbs and momentum. The impact knocked the wind out of Elias. He tried to bring his gun up, but she grabbed his wrist. Her grip was like a hydraulic clamp. She twisted, and he felt the tendons strain. He dropped the gun. It floated away, spinning lazily. Elias headbutted her. It was a desperate, dirty move. His forehead cracked against her cheekbone. It hurt him more than it hurt her, but it surprised her enough to loosen her grip. He kicked her in the stomach, using the recoil to separate them. They drifted apart, 10 meters of empty air between them. Elias wiped blood from his nose. "You hit hard," he wheezed. "Imperial finishing school." Vesper touched her cheek. There was a small bruise forming. Her silver eyes narrowed. "You fight like a feral animal." "It works," Elias said. He pulled a combat knife from his boot. It was a serrated, ugly piece of steel. "Let's try round 2. Vesper drew a collapsible baton from her belt. It snapped open, the tip glowing with thermal energy. "There will be no round 3. She launched herself at him, using a handhold to generate lethal velocity. Elias braced himself, feet against a stanchion, ready to intercept. The airlock door at the far end of the corridor hissed open. Both Elias and Vesper froze for a fraction of a second. 3 figures stepped into the zero-G zone. They were armored in heavy blackened plate, their helmets displaying a glowing red HUD. They raised assault rifles, Earth-manufactured bullpup configuration. "Targets acquired," a digitized voice boomed. "Sanitize the area." They opened fire. Bullets filled the corridor, pinging off the walls and shredding the cargo crates. "Move!" Elias roared. He didn't wait to see if she listened. He grabbed a floating crate and used it as a shield, propulsion kicking his way toward a maintenance hatch on the ceiling. Vesper was faster. She moved in a blur, dodging the suppression fire with impossible reflexes. She reached the hatch first, ripped the locking mechanism off with her bare hand, and shoved the door open. "Up!" she commanded, extending a hand. Elias didn't hesitate. He grabbed her hand. She hauled him up with terrifying strength, pulling him through the hatch just as a hail of bullets chewed up the metal rim. They tumbled into a cramped service tunnel, gravity reasserting itself with a sickening lurch. They hit the grating hard. Elias rolled to his feet, knife still in hand. Vesper was already standing, her baton glowing. They looked at each other, chest heaving. The sound of heavy boots clanging against the metal ladder below echoed up the shaft. Earth mercenaries, Vesper said, her voice tight. Wearing unlisted colors. Black Ops, Elias spat. Cleanup crew. They are here to wipe the board. Then we have a problem, Vesper said. They are blocking the exit. And they have big guns, Elias added. I hate big guns. He looked at the alien assassin. She was lethal, untrustworthy, and currently the only reason he wasn't full of holes. He saw the calculation in her eyes. She was doing the same math. Truce, Elias said, until we lose them. Vesper hesitated. Then she retracted her baton. Temporary. If you slow me down, I leave you. Deal, Elias said. Follow me. I know how these stations breathe. They moved through the maintenance arteries of Oakhaven, a maze of steam pipes, fiber optic bundles, and dripping coolant lines. It was hot, cramped, and loud. Elias took point, navigating the labyrinth with an intuitive sense of the station's architecture. He moved efficiently, sliding under low pipes and vaulting over pressure valves. Vesper followed, her movements more restrained but infinitely more graceful. She looked out of place here, a diamond in a sewer. You move well for a human, she said quietly as they paused to let a security drone buzz past a grate overhead. I grew up in places like this, Elias whispered. The belt station, the gravity wells. You learn to move or you get crushed. A rat in the walls, she noted. Better a live rat than a dead lion, Elias retorted. Your court doesn't teach you how to crawl, does it? We are taught to rise, Vesper said stiffly. To stand above the chaos. Hard to do that when people are shooting at you. Elias checked the corner. Clear. He waved her forward. They reached a junction box that controlled the sector's atmospheric scrubbers. Elias pulled out his data pad and jacked into the port. What are you doing? Vesper asked, watching the tunnel behind them. Creating a distraction, Elias said. I am going to flush the coolant system in the lower levels. It will create a fog bank. We can slip past their sensor net. Subtle, Vesper said. I aim to please. He punched in the final command. A deep shudder ran through the station's frame, followed by the hiss of releasing gas. Done. Let's move. As they ran, the silence between them began to change. It was no longer the silence of hunters circling each other. It was the silence of professionals working a problem. You don't have the core, Vesper said suddenly. It wasn't a question. Elias didn't look back. Took you this long to figure that out? If you had it, you would have extracted. You wouldn't be shaking down smugglers in the bazaar. And you, Elias countered. If your people ordered the hit, why don't you know where the prize is? Vesper went silent. The question hit a nerve. She had been asking herself the same thing for 3 days. My mission was compartmentalized, she said finally. I was told to secure the site. The core was supposed to be destroyed. Destroyed? Elias stopped. He turned to face her. They were in a narrow section of the tunnel, the red emergency lights bathing them in blood-colored shadows. That is a lie. You don't wipe out a research team to destroy a weapon like that. You do it to steal it. My Archon said, your Archon played you, Elias said brutally. Just like my handler is playing me. We are the cleanup crew, Your Highness. We are the disposable assets sent to tidy up the mess so the real players can cash in. Vesper stared at him. Her face was unreadable, but her fists were clenched. The truth of his words resonated with the doubt she had felt in the meditation chamber. I need to find the intermediary, she said. The one who moved the core. Silas, Elias said. The smuggler. Yes, I can find him, Elias said. But I can't breach his security alone. He will be holed up in the aristocratic spire by now, surrounded by private muscle. I need someone who can walk through a wall of guards without blinking. He looked her up and down. I need a weapon, he said. Vesper held his gaze. And I need a rat who knows the tunnels. If I help you reach this Silas, you give me the name of the human faction involved. Why? So I can kill the one who lied to my Archon, she said. It was a partial truth. She wanted to know who had corrupted her own order. Deal, Elias said. He held out his hand. Vesper looked at the human hand, calloused, dirty, fragile. She took it. Her skin was cool, hard as marble. His was warm, pulsing with blood. Do not make me regret this, she warned. I regret everything, Elias said. Join the club. The path to the aristocratic spire led them through the station's thermal exhaust port. It was a suicide route, a narrow catwalk suspended over the massive fusion thrusters that kept Oakhaven in orbit. The heat was oppressive. Elias was sweating through his suit, his breath coming in shallow gasps. Vesper seemed unaffected by the temperature, but the radiation warnings on her suit were flashing. You are slowing down, she said, not unkindly. She was walking ahead, balancing on a beam that was barely wide enough for a boot. My species evolved on a savanna. Elias grunted, wiping sweat from his eyes. Not inside a toaster. Fragile, Vesper murmured. You require specific gravity, specific air pressure, specific temperature. It is a miracle you survived leaving your gravity well. We are stubborn, Elias said. No, that counts for something. Arrogance is not a survival trait, she countered. Says the woman wearing a cape to a covert op. Elias shot back. It was a coat, Vesper corrected, and it was tactical weave. It was dramatic, Elias said. You aliens love your drama. Everything has to be a ceremony. Sanitize the area. The silence of the void. Just shoot the guy and go home. Vesper stopped. She looked back at him, a flicker of amusement in her eyes. And you humans? Just a guy on a schedule. You pretend to be simple, but you bury your meanings under layers of irony. It is exhausting. It's called charm. Elias grinned. It is called inefficiency. A sudden tremor shook the catwalk. The fusion drive below them flared. A wave of superheated plasma vented from the manifold, rushing up toward them like a wall of fire. Shield, Elias screamed. He didn't have one. His kinetic gel was useless against thermal waves. Vesper didn't think. She moved. She tackled Elias, slamming him against the far wall of the shaft. She activated her personal energy shield, a shimmering dome of violet light that snapped into existence around them. The fire washed over them. The roar was deafening. The heat inside the small shield bubble spiked instantly. Elias was pressed flat against the metal, Vesper's body covering his. He could feel the hardness of her armor, the terrifying strength of her frame. For 10 seconds, the world was fire. Then the vent cycled down. The flames receded. Vesper didn't move immediately. The shield flickered and died. They were left in the sudden ringing silence, pressed together in the dark. Elias looked up. Vesper's face was inches from his. Her helmet was retracted. He could see the sweat on her skin now, shimmering like stardust. Her eyes were wide, the pupils dilated slits. He could feel her breathing, rapid, controlled. She wasn't a statue. She was alive. She was terrified. And she had just used her own body to shield him. You okay? Elias whispered. His voice was hoarse. Vesper stared at him. She seemed to be studying his face, looking for something she didn't have a name for. Your heart rate is elevated, she said softly. Yeah, well, Elias swallowed. I almost got cooked. You are, Very warm, she said. It sounded like an accusation. Mammal, Elias said. Warm blood. She didn't pull away. The distance between them was charged with a strange, static electricity. It wasn't just adrenaline. It was recognition. Two weapons, discarded by their masters, finding themselves in the same holster. We should move, Vesper said, but she didn't move. Yeah, Elias said. He didn't move either. He looked at her lips. They were pale violet. He wondered, with a sudden insane spike of curiosity, what they tasted like. Probably ozone and danger. Vesper's eyes dropped to his mouth, then snapped back up to his eyes. A micro-expression of confusion crossed her face. She was engineered for violence, not this. This proximity, this dependency. She pushed herself off him, the moment shattering like glass. The thermal cycle will repeat in 4 minutes, she said, her voice regaining its icy composure. We must clear the shaft. Right, Elias said, peeling himself off the wall. 4 minutes. He watched her walk away, her stride long and purposeful. He took a breath, trying to steady his hands. Don't be stupid, he told himself. She is a shark. You are the bait. But as he followed her into the dark, he couldn't shake the feeling of her weight against him. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. He wasn't just working with her, he was trusting her, and that was going to get him killed. They breached the service entrance to the aristocratic spire an hour later. The air here was scented with jasmine and money. The floors were carpeted. They found a quiet maintenance alcove to regroup. Elias checked his pistol. Vesper adjusted the power output on her gauntlets. Silas is in the penthouse, Elias said. My datapad picked up his encryption signature. He is waiting for a buyer. Then we go up, Vesper said. Vesper, Elias said. She looked at him. Back there, he said, gesturing vaguely toward the thermal shaft. Thanks. Vesper looked away. She adjusted a strap on her bracer. It was tactical. If you died, I would be lost in the tunnels. You are my guide. Sure, Elias said. Tactical. He leaned back against the wall, sliding down to sit on the floor for a moment. He felt old. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind the familiar ache of old wounds and bad choices. You know, he said quietly. They tell you that being a ghost is freedom. No rules, no chain of command. You go where you want, do what you want. Vesper watched him. Is it not? No, Elias said. He looked at the ceiling. Freedom is just a fancy word for having nobody who cares if you don't come home. Vesper went still. She thought of the meditation chamber on the silent hymn, the empty silence, the cold perfection of her existence. She had always been told that attachment was a weakness, a shackle. But looking at the human, she realized that shackles also tethered you to the ground. Without them, you just drifted. We are tools, Vesper said. Tools do not require homes. They require a hand to wield them. Maybe I'm tired of being wielded, Elias said. He looked at her. Maybe I want to choose who holds the handle. He stood up, groaning slightly as his knees popped. Let's go find this smuggler, he said, the mask of the operator sliding back into place. And let's go break some bad news to some bad people. Vesper watched him for a second longer. Choose who holds the handle. It was a dangerous thought. It was a human thought. But as she followed him toward the elevator, she found that it was a thought she could not delete. She checked her phase blade. The weapon was ready. And for the first time in her life, she wasn't sure who she was pointing it at. Nereus Prime was a world that had forgotten the concept of dry land. It was an oceanic super-Earth, a sphere of turbulent indigo water capped by storms that could swallow continents. There were no islands here, only the megacities, colossal biomimetic structures that floated on the waves like metal lilies, anchored by tension cables that plunged 20 miles down into the crushing dark. It was a neutral zone, a playground for the corporate dynasties that owned the space between stars. Here, the laws of Earth and the edicts of the Ethelgard Empire were treated as polite suggestions rather than mandates. Money was the only gravity that mattered. Elias Ron stood on the rain-slicked balcony of a cheap capsule hotel in the lower ring of the city, looking up at the spires of the aristocracy. The rain here was warm and smelled of salt and money. Aerodyne Systems, Elias said, reading the data scrolling on his handheld tablet. They financed the Typhon research team, shell companies inside shell companies, but the money trail leads back to Earth. Vesper stood behind him, her silhouette reflected in the wet glass of the sliding door. She was still wearing the combat suit from Oakhaven, though she had cleaned the grime from it. She looked out of place in the cramped room, a leopard in a shoebox. "It gets worse," she said. Her voice was flat, carrying the weight of a betrayal she was still processing. "I accessed the diplomatic archives using the codes we took from the smuggler. The contract for my faction, the order to sanitize the moon, was not generated by the High Court. It was requested by a human liaison office in Geneva and rubber-stamped by a traitor within my own hierarchy." Elias turned to face her. "So, Earth pays for the research. Earth finds out the research is dangerous. Earth hires alien assassins to wipe it out to keep their hands clean. And now Earth is trying to buy the results back from the black market. It is a circle of snakes eating their own tails," Vesper said. "Why kill the scientists if they were paying them?" "Because the scientists were going to publish," Elias guessed. Aerodyne didn't want a scientific breakthrough. They wanted a weapon. And when the team found something too big to hide, the company decided to liquidate the assets and steal the prototype. He tapped the screen. "The core is being moved tonight. The Vorokov family is hosting the Winter Solstice Gala on their private floating palace. It is the biggest social event of the season. The smuggler's logs say the handoff happens there." Vesper looked at the holographic image of the palace, a sprawling structure of gold and glass drifting in the calm eye of a permanent storm. "Security will be absolute. Bioscanners, weapon dampeners, retinal locks. Good thing we aren't going as soldiers," Elias said. He kicked a heavy case that was sitting on the floor. He had spent the last of his credit line procuring it. "Open it." Vesper knelt and unlatched the case. Inside lay fabric, not armor, silk, velvet, and tailored wool. "Disguise?" she asked, lifting a gown that shimmered like oil on water. "Camouflage," Elias corrected. "Tonight, I am not a ghost. I am Julian Thorne, a dissolute venture capitalist from Mars. And you," he paused, watching her hold the dress. "You are Lady Vespera, an exiled royal looking for investment opportunities. We are going to walk right through the front door, drink their champagne, and steal the future right out from under their noses." Vesper looked at the dress, then at him. "I do not know how to be a dissolute venture capitalist." "You don't have to," Elias grinned, a sharp, wolfish expression. "You just have to be terrifyingly beautiful and treat everyone like they are dirt. You are an assassin, Vesper. You already know how to look down on people. Just do it without the knife." The Azure Palace was a testament to the arrogance of wealth. It floated on anti-grav pontoons, a cathedral of light suspended above the black ocean. Shuttle traffic buzzed around its landing pads like fireflies. Elias adjusted the cuffs of his tuxedo. It was midnight blue, tailored to hide the scar tissue on his neck and the pistol strapped to the small of his back. A ceramic composite model that laughed at metal detectors. He ran a hand through his hair, slicking it back. He looked expensive. He looked dangerous. He looked like the kind of man who wrecked economies for sport. He turned when the bathroom door opened. Vesper stepped out. Elias forgot to breathe for 2 seconds. The gown was a deep, iridescent violet, cut to leave her shoulders and back bare. It clung to her like a second skin, highlighting the alien grace of her physiology, the length of her limbs, the power coiled in her muscles. Her skin, the color of twilight, seemed to glow against the fabric. Her bioluminescent markings, usually hidden by armor, were visible now, tracing elegant geometric patterns down her neck and spine. She had woven silver wire into her hair, pulling it up to expose the sharp line of her jaw. She wasn't just beautiful. She was an event. "The footwear is inefficient," Vesper said, looking down at the high heels. "If I have to run, I will break my ankles." "If we have to run," Elias managed to say, finding his voice. "Take them off and stab someone with the heel." Vesper looked up at him. Her silver eyes scanned him, processing the change in his appearance. "You look deceptive. The suit mimics authority, but your eyes are still feral." "That is the look we are going for," Elias said, offering his arm. "Shall we go jeopardize international relations?" She took his arm. Her touch was cool, her grip firm. "Lead the way. Operator." The ballroom was a sensory overload. 3,000 guests filled the cavernous space. The ceiling was a transparent dome revealing the storm raging outside, lightning forking across the sky, rain lashing the glass. While inside, the air was still and scented with orchids. Music, played by a live orchestra of multi-limbed androids, drifted through the crowd. Elias and Vesper moved through the room like a single entity. They were a shark in a tank of goldfish. "Target is Sector 4, Elias murmured, smiling and nodding at a passing dignitary. "Private viewing deck. That is where the transaction happens." "I see security," Vesper whispered back. She was holding a flute of champagne she had no intention of drinking. 4 guards. Kinetic shielding under their jackets. Professional. "We need a distraction," Elias said. "Something to pull the eyes away from the East Wing." "I could kill the host," Vesper suggested casually. "Subtle, Vesper. We discussed subtle." "Inefficient," she sighed. They mingled. Elias played his role with terrifying ease. He laughed at bad jokes, flattered matriarchs, and hinted at illegal mining operations on the outer rim. He was charming, vacuous, and magnetic. Vesper watched him with a mix of confusion and fascination. She saw how he used humor as a shield, how he deflected questions with a smile that never reached his eyes. "You are good at this," she murmured as they moved toward the center of the room. "Lying. It is all the same skill set," Elias said, his voice dropping. "Reading the room, finding the weak point, exploiting it. Whether you use a bullet or a compliment, the mechanic is the same." "Lady Vespera," a voice boomed. A heavy-set man with synthetic skin grafts and a mouthful of gold teeth blocked their path. It was Lord Vorokov, the host. "I was told we had royalty in our midst." Vorokov beamed, eyeing Vesper with hungry curiosity. "But my scanners don't recognize your house." Vesper looked at him. She didn't blink. She tilted her head slightly, letting the light catch the silver in her eyes. "That is because my house does not submit to scanners. Lord Vorokov, we prefer to remain unlisted." The temperature in the immediate vicinity seemed to drop 10 degrees. Vorokov faltered. "Of course," he stammered. "Privacy is the ultimate luxury." "Dance with me," Elias cut in, sensing the tension. He grabbed Vesper's hand before she could decide to educate Vorokov on the fragility of his windpipe. He pulled her onto the dance floor. The orchestra swelled into a waltz. "I was handling it," Vesper hissed as he placed a hand on her waist. "You were about to snap his neck," Elias said, spinning her. "And while I appreciate the enthusiasm, it creates a lot of paperwork." They moved together. It should have been awkward, a human operator and an alien assassin trying to navigate a formal dance. But it wasn't. They were both creatures of physical precision. They understood momentum, leverage, and flow. The dance was just combat in slow motion. Vesper followed his lead, her body reacting to his subtle cues before he even fully signaled them. They spun through the crowd, a blur of violet and midnight blue. "You are tense," Elias said quietly, his face close to hers. "There are too many variables," Vesper admitted. Her gaze darted around the room, tracking exits, calculating threat vectors. "I am exposed, no armor, no weapon, surrounded by potential enemies." "Look at me," Elias ordered gently. Vesper looked at him. "You are the weapon," Elias said. "The dress is just wrapping paper, so forget the room and just focus on the mission or focus on me." Vesper stared into his eyes. They were brown, flecked with green, full of a tired intelligence. For a moment, the noise of the gala faded. The storm outside seemed to pause. She felt a strange, terrifying sensation in her chest, a hollowness that ached to be filled. She started, her voice faltering. "I do not belong here, Elias, not just in this room and in this life. I look at these people laughing, touching, and I feel like a ghost in a machine." "We are both ghosts," Elias said, his hand tightening slightly on her waist. "That is why we haunt the same places." Her composure cracked, just a hairline fracture. Her mask of imperial disdain slipped, revealing a profound, ancient loneliness. She leaned into him, just an inch, seeking an anchor. "I was engineered to be alone," she whispered. "Solidarity is a defect." "Then let's be defective together," Elias murmured. The music stopped. The spell broke. Elias checked his watch. "The guards are rotating when we have a 3-minute window, and let's go." They slipped away from the dance floor, moving into the service corridors that ran behind the gilded walls. The transition from opulence to utility was jarring. Here, it was all steel and conduit. They reached the server room adjacent to the private viewing deck. The door was locked with a biometric encryption key. "Can you open it?" Vesper asked. Elias pulled a small device from his pocket, a black prism mimic he had built from salvage parts. "I can confuse it. Cover me." He worked fast, his fingers flying over the keypad. Vesper stood guard, her body language shifting instantly from aristocrat to predator. She kicked off the high heels, leaving them in the corner. She preferred the cold metal on her bare feet. "Got it," Elias whispered. The door slid open. Inside, rows of servers hummed. In the center of the room, a terminal was active, displaying a live transfer log. Elias jumped onto the console. "Okay, let's see who is buying the apocalypse." He pulled up the transaction history. The data core, the real one, had been authenticated 10 minutes ago. The transfer of funds was pending. "Buyer ID," Elias muttered. "Come on." He bypassed the final firewall. The screen flashed red, then resolved into a logo. It wasn't an alien crest. It wasn't a corporate brand. It was a seal, a globe surrounded by 12 stars, crossed by a sword. "The Committee of 12, Elias said, his voice cold. "The Shadow Council." "Earth's Security Directorate?" Vesper asked, leaning over his shoulder. "Higher than that," Elias said. These are the people who tell the Directorate what to think. They are the ones who decide which wars we fight and which truths we bury. He scrolled through the technical data attached to the sale. The file header read, Project Omega, Deep Network Key, Fleet Disable Protocol. It is not a weapon, Elias realized, reading the summary. It is a key. The research team found a way to access the ancient transit network, the one the precursors built 1 million years ago. This code, it can shut down every warp gate in the sector remotely. It can freeze trade. It can strand whole fleets in the dark. If Earth controls the gates, Vesper said, realizing the horror. They control the galaxy. They can starve my people without firing a shot. And they can blackmail the corporations, Elias added. Absolute power. We have to stop the transfer, Vesper said. I am uploading a worm, Elias said, typing furiously. It will corrupt the data packet. They will get a core full of garbage. Intruder alert, a mechanical voice announced calmly. The lights in the server room turned red. That was fast, Elias grimaced. Download complete. Let's move. They turned to the door just as it blew inward. A concussion grenade rolled into the room. Down! Vesper screamed. She grabbed Elias and threw him behind the server rack. The grenade detonated, a flash of blinding light and a wave of sonic pressure that shattered the glass partitions. Through the ringing in his ears, Elias heard the stomp of boots. Secure the assets. Lethal force authorized. 4 tactical operators in heavy armor stormed the room. They weren't using stunners. They were using plasma carbines. Vesper moved. She didn't have a weapon, so she became one. She vaulted over the server rack, grabbing a loose conduit pipe she had ripped from the wall. She was a blur of violet silk and violence. She struck the first soldier in the throat, the pipe crumpling his armor. She spun, using his falling body as a shield against the second soldier's fire. Elias popped up, firing his ceramic pistol. He put 2 rounds into the third soldier's visor. The glass shattered. The man went down. Clear! Vesper shouted, dropping the pipe. One more! Elias yelled. A 5th soldier had appeared in the doorway, leveling a heavy repeater at Vesper's exposed back. Elias didn't think. He didn't calculate. He lunged across the gap, shoving Vesper aside. The plasma bolt hit him in the left shoulder. It felt like being branded with a sun. The impact lifted him off his feet and slammed him into the wall. The smell of burning fabric and seared flesh filled the room. Vesper screamed, a sound that was not human, a harmonic shriek of rage. She snatched the pistol from Elias's falling hand and fired 3 times. The soldier dropped, dead before he hit the floor. She was at Elias's side in an instant. Her hands, usually so steady, were trembling. Elias! He was conscious, but his face was gray. The plasma had burned through the tuxedo and the kinetic mesh. His shoulder was a ruin of charred skin. Did we get the receipt? Elias wheezed, trying to smile. Idiot, Vesper hissed. She hauled him up, supporting his weight. Stupid, fragile, heroic idiot. Exit, Elias gasped. Maintenance chute, behind the cooling unit. They escaped the palace in a stolen luxury shuttle, Vesper piloting with manual overrides while Elias bled on the white leather upholstery. She flew them low, under the radar mesh, weaving through the towering waves of the ocean until they reached a decommissioned oil rig in the industrial sector. It was a safe house Elias had set up years ago. Cold, damp, and smelling of rust, but secure. Inside, Vesper laid him on a metal table. She ripped the ruined tuxedo jacket away, her movements precise and clinical now. She found the med kit. This will hurt, she said. It already hurts. Elias gritted out. She applied the biofoam. It hissed as it sealed the wound, knitting the tissue back together. Elias arched his back, a guttural sound escaping his throat. Vesper placed a hand on his chest, holding him down. Her hand was cool against his feverish skin. After a minute, the pain receded to a dull throb. Elias lay back, breathing heavily. Vesper stood over him. She had discarded the ruined gown, wearing only the undersuit now. Her hair was coming loose, the silver wire tangled. She looked wild and terrifyingly composed. "Why?" she asked. Elias opened his eyes. "Why what?" "You took the shot," she said. "You calculated the trajectory. You knew the damage yield. It was illogical. I have higher pain tolerance. I have redundant organ systems. I am the superior shield." "You were busy," Elias rasped. "I didn't want you to get a hole in the dress." "Do not mock me," Vesper said, her voice cracking. She leaned in, gripping the edge of the table. "My people. We are designed. We are written. My empathy was edited out. My self-preservation is a variable, not an instinct. I should not matter to you. I am a variable." Elias reached up with his good hand. He hesitated, then touched her arm. "You aren't a variable, Vesper," he said softly. "And I don't care what they edited out. I see you." Vesper froze. She looked at his hand on her arm. She felt the heat of it. "I feel," she whispered. "Too much. When you fell, I felt a panic that was not in my programming. It was messy. It was inefficient." "It's called fear," Elias said. "It means you have something to lose." "I was made to feel nothing," she said, leaning closer, drawn by a gravity she couldn't fight. "But around you, I feel dangerously human." "I was trained to trust no one," Elias confessed, his voice rough. "To cut the cord, because chains strangle the truth. But tonight, I didn't want to be a ghost." They were inches apart. The air between them was thick, charged with the smell of ozone and blood and rain. Vesper looked at his lips. She could see the pulse in his neck. She leaned down. Her forehead rested against his. She closed her eyes, inhaling his scent. It was an intimacy more profound than sex. It was a surrender. Two weapons, laying themselves down. "Elias," she breathed. He tilted his head up, his lips brushing hers. A feather-light contact that sent a shockwave through them both. It wasn't a kiss of passion, but of desperation. A promise. A siren blared from the wall monitor. They pulled apart, the moment shattering. Elias turned his head to look at the screen. It was a news feed from the Nereus Prime broadcast network. The headline flashed in bold, red letters. "Terror at the Palace. Video footage released. Rogue agents identified." On the screen, a grainy video played. It showed Vesper attacking the guards. It showed Elias hacking the terminal, but the audio had been doctored. "Death to the Council," the digital Elias on the screen said. "Burn the city." The anchor's voice was grave. "Authorities have identified the attackers as Elias Run, a disgraced human operative and a rogue alien assassin known as Vesper. They are wanted for the murder of 5 security officers and the attempted destruction of the Azure Palace. They are considered armed and extremely dangerous. A bounty of 50 million credits has been placed on their heads." Elias stared at the screen. He laughed, a dry, bitter sound. "They framed us," he said. "The committee. They didn't just want the core, they wanted a scapegoat." Vesper straightened up. The vulnerability vanished, replaced by cold steel. But her hand lingered near his for a second longer than necessary. "Then we have no choice," she said. "If they want monsters, we will show them monsters." Elias sat up, wincing. He looked at the assassin. Part 4, he said. We run. The transport shuttle, a stolen rusted bucket that smelled of burning coolant and desperation, shuddered as it slammed into the docking clamps of Boreas. Boreas was not a planet. It was a carcass. Eons ago, it had been an ice moon. Now, it was a hollowed-out sphere of frozen methane and rock, a subterranean labyrinth of smuggling routes, illegal refineries, and transit tunnels that served as the circulatory system for everything the galaxy wanted to keep hidden. Elias Rane killed the engines. The silence that followed was heavy, punctuated only by the groaning of the ship's cooling metal. He sat back in the pilot's seat, wincing as the movement pulled at the fresh synth skin over his shoulder wound. We are here, Elias said. The armpit of the sector. If you can smell it through the hull, we have arrived. Vesper stood behind him. She had stripped off the remains of the gala gown hours ago, replacing it with a scavenged flight suit they had found in the shuttle's locker. It was too big for her, hiding her lethal silhouette in folds of gray canvas. But she wore it with the same terrifying dignity she wore armor. This place is structurally unsound, Vesper noted, looking at the display which showed thermal maps of the ice tunnels. And the local authority is non-existent. That is the point, Elias said, unbuckling his harness. No authority means no extradition treaties. We are ghosts here. Vesper, just 2 more rats in the wall. I am not a rat, she corrected him coldly. I am a tactician currently operating in a suboptimal environment. Right, suboptimal. Elias grabbed his gear bag. Let's go, tactician, and keep your head down. If anyone asks, you are a mute bodyguard and I am a spice trader with a gambling problem. They disembarked into the freezing fog of the docking bay. The air was thin and bitter, biting at exposed skin. The bay was crowded with ships that looked like they had been welded together from scrap. Creatures of a dozen species moved through the mist, dock workers, fixers, mercenaries, fixers. They moved quickly, heading for the lower levels where the atmosphere was thicker and the questions were fewer. Your bureaucracy is fascinating, Vesper said as they walked, her voice low. She was scanning the crowd, her eyes tracking threat vectors. I reviewed the Earth protocols while you flew. You require permits to breathe, permits to trade, permits to die. It is a culture of paper walls. It keeps the chaos organized, Elias muttered, pulling his collar up. Civilization is just a mutual agreement not to shoot each other over a parking spot. We use paper. You guys use, what? Ritual combat? We use honor, Vesper said, and hierarchy. When an Ethelguard enters a room, everyone knows where they stand. There is no confusion, no forms in triplicate. You bow or you bleed. Sounds exhausting, Elias said. My knees hurt just thinking about it. Give me a corrupt city council and a parking ticket any day. At least I can bribe a councilman. You can't bribe a sword. You can if you offer it a better neck, Vesper replied. Elias chuckled, a dry sound. That is dark, even for you. It is efficient. They turned a corner into a narrow service tunnel, the walls slick with condensation. The humor evaporated instantly. Elias stopped. He held up a hand. We are being followed, he whispered. Vesper didn't turn around. 3 distinct heartbeats behind us. 1 is pacing us. 2 are flanking. Earth or yours? The pacing one moves with a kinetic dampener. Vesper analyzed. No footfalls. That is Ethelguard shadow tech. The flankers are heavier. Earth mercenaries. A joint task force, Elias said, checking the charge on his pistol. They really want us dead. The committee and the court holding hands. It is almost touching. We need to lose them, Vesper said. The main arteries are too exposed. There is a vent line 300 meters ahead. Elias said. Leads to the old geothermal taps. It will be hot, tight, and smell like sulfur. Lead on, Vesper said. I am already insulted by this planet. A little sulfur will not change that. They descended into the belly of the ice world. The tunnels grew narrower, the ice replacing steel. They were walking through the veins of a frozen giant. Hours passed. The pursuit was relentless. Every time they stopped to rest, Vesper would tilt her head, hearing the faint, ghostly whisper of phase blades cutting through ice miles away, or the hum of hunter-killer drones. They were being corralled. They are steering us, Elias realized, leaning against a wall of jagged ice, his breath plumed in the air. They are cutting off the exits, driving us toward the core. Why? Vesper asked. Because there is nowhere to run at the core, Elias said, just a drop into the magma tap. Then we changed the destination, Vesper said. She looked at the data pad they had stolen. There is a power signature in Sector 9, isolated, shielded. It does not match the station grid. Elias looked at the coordinates. That is a dead zone, collapsed tunnels. The energy signature is stable, Vesper insisted. Someone is keeping the lights on, and they are hiding it. A hideout, Elias nodded, or a trap. Only one way to find out. They veered off the main path, squeezing through a fissure in the ice that looked like a wound in the world. The temperature dropped. The air grew stale. They found the habitat an hour later. It was a module from a scientific drilling rig, buried halfway into the ice wall, covered in camouflage netting and thermal blankets. Elias approached the airlock, weapon raised. Knock, knock! The airlock cycled immediately. A voice crackled over a hidden speaker. You took long enough. I have been watching you on the perimeter sensors for 2 hours. You are loud, Mr. Brana. Elias frowned. Open the door! The heavy steel hissed open. Standing inside, holding a modified mining laser like a rifle, was a man who was supposed to be dead. Dr. Eris Thorne looked thinner than his file photos. His beard was wild, his eyes rimmed with red, but his hands were steady. Dr. Thorne, Elias said, lowering his gun slightly. Newsfeed said you died at Typhon. I did, Thorne said, stepping aside to let them in. Best career move I ever made. Come in, quickly. The drones are scanning the thermal vents. The habitat was a clutter of stolen servers, survival rations, and handwritten notes taped to the walls. It smelled of recycled coffee and fear. You are the one who hid the core, Vesper said, her silver eyes fixated on the scientist. And you sent the coordinates to the smuggler. I sent them to a dead drop, Thorne corrected. I hoped someone with a conscience would find them. Instead, I got a spook and a whatever she is. He gestured to Vesper with the laser. I am the consequence of your discovery, Vesper said icily. Sit down, Thorne ordered. We don't have much time. Elias sat on a crate. We saw the transfer logs. Doc, we know the committee is buying the core and we know what it does. The deep network. Thorne laughed, a frantic, brittle sound. You think you know? You saw the file header. You didn't see the math. He pulled up a holographic display. It showed a map of the galaxy, connected by thin, glowing lines of the warp gates. The warp gates aren't just tunnels, Thorne said, his voice trembling. They are valves. The precursors who built them didn't just use them for travel, they used them for control. The network is a nervous system. The key I found, it doesn't just shut them down. It rewrites the destination. Elias went still. Rewrites? You could step into a gate at Terra Prime thinking you are going to Mars, Thorne whispered, and exit into the heart of a sun, or a black hole, or nowhere at all. The committee doesn't want to block trade. Rein. They want to hold the entire galaxy hostage. Obey us, or we flush your fleets into the void. A guillotine for civilization, Vesper murmured. Invisible and absolute. We were going to publish, Thorn said, rubbing his face. The team. We voted. We were going to release the findings to the open scientific community. Make it public domain so no single government could weaponize it. And someone talked, Elias said. My assistant, Thorn said bitterly. Young, ambitious, thought he was being a patriot. He contacted the Earth Liaison Office. 12 hours later, your people showed up. He looked at Vesper and wiped us out. Not my people, Vesper said, her voice hard. My faction was used, just as your assistant was used. It isn't about human or alien, Elias said, staring at the map. It is pro-power. The committee and the corrupt archons. They are the same breed. They would burn both our worlds to be the kings of the ashes. A proximity alarm blared. Thorn jumped. They found us! How? Vesper demanded. They didn't track you, Thorn said, grabbing a data drive. They tracked the thermal bloom of the habitat. They are drilling through the ice ceiling. We have 5 minutes before this room is a vacuum. Is there a back door? Elias asked. There is an old maintenance shaft, Thorn said. Leads down to the magma tap pressure valves, but the oxygen scrubbers are offline. The air is thin. We can breathe thin air, Elias said, grabbing Thorn's arm. Can you run? Do I have a choice? No, Vesper said. Move! The trek through the lower shaft was a hallucination of shadows and pain. The air was so thin it felt like swallowing glass. Elias could feel his heart hammering against his ribs, trying to pump oxygen that wasn't there. His vision tunneled. Vesper was faring better. Her physiology adapted for high-altitude environments, but even she was slowing down. Thorn was wheezing, stumbling every few meters. Keep moving, Elias rasped, hauling Thorn over a pipe. Don't! Stop. Why? Thorn gasped. Why are you doing this? You're a mercenary. I'm an operator, Elias corrected, his voice slurring slightly. Different tax bracket. Vesper grabbed Elias's good arm, pulling him forward. Save your breath, human. Talk later. They reached a section of the tunnel where the ice had sublimated into a thick fog. They had to crawl under a collapsed gantry. In the dark, pressed together in the freezing mist, the barriers of rank and species began to dissolve. You asked me, Vesper whispered, her voice close to Elias's ear. Why I hesitated at the station. Why I didn't kill you. I assumed I was too handsome. Elias wheezed. I was taught that loyalty is a straight line, Vesper said, ignoring his deflection. Obedience is virtue. Questioning is treason. But when I saw my brothers slaughter those scientists, the line broke. She stopped. She turned to look at him in the gloom. Her silver eyes were dim. I realized that obedience is not courage, she said. It is cowardice. It is easier to follow an order than to choose a conscience. I was a coward. Elias. Elias looked at her. He saw the crack in the perfect armor, the raw, bleeding thing underneath. You aren't a coward, he whispered. A coward would have stayed on the ship. You walked away. That is the hardest thing a soldier can do. I don't know who I am anymore, she admitted. If I am not an assassin, what am I? You're Vesper, Elias said. Just Vesper. And right now, that is enough. He reached out, his hand finding hers in the dark. He squeezed. She squeezed back, her grip crushing, desperate. It was a transfer of energy, a grounding wire between two storms. We move, she said, her voice gaining strength. We survive. They burst out of the shaft into a cavernous drilling chamber. It was an industrial cathedral, dominated by a massive dormant boring machine the size of a skyscraper. But they were not alone. Lights flared from the gantries above. "Ambush!" Vesper screamed. She shoved Thorn behind a crate just as the air filled with plasma fire. It was a kill box. From the shadows, figures descended on rappelling lines. 3 Aethelguard assassins, their cloaks shifting like oil, and a squad of Earth tactical troops, their armor heavy and black. "Target the female!" a voice roared. "She is the traitor. The human is secondary." Vesper moved. She was a whirlwind. She drew her phase blade, stolen from the first assassin she had killed, and met the charge. Clang. Hiss. Sparks showered the room as her blade met the blade of a rival assassin. They moved so fast Elias could barely track them. It was a dance of light and death. Elias popped up, firing his pistol. He took out an Earth soldier, then another. "Thorn, get the hatch open, the boring machine!" "It takes time to cycle," Thorn yelled, hacking the control panel. Vesper was fighting 2 assassins at once. She was good, but she was tired, and she was unarmored. A blade sliced across her thigh. She stumbled. An Earth soldier leveled a grenade launcher at the group. "Elias!" Vesper shouted. She saw it. The geometry of the fight. The grenade would hit the crate protecting Thorn and Elias. They would die. She was out of range. She could jump to the upper gantry. She could escape into the ventilation system. She could vanish. It was the logical choice, the survival choice. She looked at Elias. He was firing cover for her, his face grim, blood soaking his shoulder bandage. "Choose!" Vesper screamed, a sound of pure defiance. She didn't jump for the gantry, then she jumped at the grenade launcher. She crossed the distance in a single, impossible leap. She took the round, not with her body, but with her momentum. She kicked the barrel of the launcher upward just as the soldier fired. The grenade hit the ceiling, detonating in a shower of rock and ice. The shockwave slammed Vesper and the soldier to the ground. Elias didn't hesitate. He broke cover, sprinting across the open ground. He reached Vesper, who was dazed. Trying to rise, he grabbed her harness and hauled her up, firing wildly with his free hand to keep the assassins back. "You idiot!" he roared, dragging her toward the boring machine. "You beautiful, suicidal idiot!" "I chose," Vesper gasped, limping. The machine's hatch hissed open. Thorn waved them in. "Get in!" They tumbled into the airlock. Elias slammed the manual override. The heavy door groaned shut, sealing with a thunderous clang just as a phase blade sparked against the outer metal. "Thorn, fire it up!" Elias yelled. "Engaging emergency drills!" The massive machine shuddered. The floor tipped, with a grinding roar that shook their teeth. The boring machine lurched forward, its laser drills melting the ice below them. They plunged downward, leaving the assassins behind in the smoke. The cockpit of the machine was quiet, lit only by the red glow of the emergency lights. Elias sat on the floor, back against the bulkhead. Vesper lay opposite him, her leg hastily bandaged. They were alive. The adrenaline was crashing, leaving them shaking. Vesper looked at Elias. Her chest was heaving. "I could have left." "I know," Elias said. "I should have left. I know." "Why did you come back for me?" she asked. "I am a weapon. You are the operator. You complete the mission." "Screw the mission," Elias said hoarsely. "You don't leave your partner behind." Partner. The word hung in the air between them. It wasn't a rank. It wasn't a directive. It was a choice. Vesper dragged herself across the floor. She ignored the pain in her leg. She stopped in front of him. She reached out, her hands trembling, not from fear, but from the sheer intensity of being alive. She cupped his face. Her thumbs traced the stubble on his jaw, the dirt, the exhaustion. Elias leaned into her touch. He covered her hands with his own. "We are going to burn for this," Elias whispered. "They will hunt us to the edge of the universe." "Let them come," Vesper said fiercely. Her forehead rested against his. Their breath mingled, shallow and warm. "I am done with shadows, Elias. I want to live in the light, even if it burns." It was a moment of absolute clarity. They were two broken things that had found a way to fit together. A voice said from the pilot's chair. They pulled apart, looking up. Dr. Thorne was watching them, looking awkward. "I hate to interrupt the bonding ritual, but you need to see this." He pointed to the comms panel. "I tapped into the localized news feed to see if they were reporting our death." Thorne said, "They aren't. They are reporting something else." Elias and Vesper stood up, using each other for support, and walked to the console. A holographic projection hovered in the air. It was a broadcast from Earth. The spokesperson was a woman with a severe face, standing in front of the United Earth flag. "In light of the unprovoked alien terrorist attack on the Azure Palace," she said, her voice smooth and grave, "and the tragic massacre of our scientists at Typhon, the Earth Security Council is announcing a state of emergency." The image changed to show a massive fleet gathering in orbit. "We can no longer tolerate the aggression of the Ethelgard Empire. We must secure our borders. We must secure the future. To this end, all diplomatic channels are suspended. The First Fleet has been mobilized." "It's a war speech," Elias said, his blood running cold. "Furthermore," the woman continued, "Earth will be hosting an emergency interstellar summit at the Helios Ring Station in 3 days. We will present irrefutable evidence of alien aggression to the neutral worlds and demand a coalition force." "The summit," Vesper whispered, "that is the trap. They are going to use the fake evidence to get the neutral worlds to join the war," Thorne said. "And once the war starts, the committee will use the deep network key to cripple the enemy fleets. It will be a slaughter." "A manufactured genocide," Elias said. "Designed to consolidate power." Vesper looked at the screen. She looked at the fleet. Then she looked at Elias. "The Helios Ring Station," she said. "It is a fortress." "It is," Elias agreed. "We have the surviving scientist," Vesper said, nodding at Thorne. "We have the truth about the network, and we have the witness testimony of an assassin who was ordered to pull the trigger." "If we can get into that summit," Elias said, a dangerous light entering his eyes, "and hijack the broadcast, we can show the galaxy the truth. We can expose the committee and the corrupt archons live on air." "It is a suicide mission," Thorne said, pale. "We are 3 people against 2 governments." Elias looked at Vesper. He saw the fire in her silver eyes. It wasn't the cold fire of a programmed killer. It was the hot, messy, beautiful fire of a free woman. "We aren't just 3 people," Elias said, grinning. "We are an operator with no chain of command, a royal assassin with an attitude problem, and a dead scientist." Vesper smiled. It was a real smile, sharp and terrifying. "I like those odds," she said. "Set a course for Helios," Elias ordered. "We have a war to stop." The Helios Ring Station was a blinding halo of white stone and transparent steel, suspended in the neutral zone between the Earth sphere and the Ethelgard border. It was a monument to diplomacy, designed to look like a handshake in the void. But to Elias Rane, it looked like a guillotine waiting for a neck. The station spun slowly, its centrifugal gravity holding an atmosphere of perfumed air and polite menace. Inside the grand atrium, the floor was a mosaic of rare marble imported from a dozen worlds, polished until it reflected the faces of the liars walking upon it. Elias adjusted the collar of his dress uniform. He was no longer a dissolute venture capitalist. Today, he was Commander Valerius of the Outer Rim Coalition, a minor military attaché from a jurisdiction boring enough to avoid scrutiny but official enough to grant access to the security zones. Beside him walked Vesper. She wore the ceremonial robes of a high priestess of the void, a disguise that shrouded her lethal physique in layers of heavy, midnight blue silk. Her face was hidden behind a veil of shimmering energy, a standard accessory for the clergy of her culture. It obscured her features, but Elias could feel the tension radiating off her like heat from a reactor. They moved in perfect synchronization. There was no need for hand signals or whispered commands anymore. When Elias slowed his pace to avoid a cluster of Earth journalists, Vesper drifted to his left, covering his blind spot. When she tensed at the sight of a security drone, he casually shifted his stance to block its line of sight. They flowed around each other like water, a fluid, deadly ecosystem of two. "Status," Elias murmured, barely moving his lips. "The perimeter is saturated," Vesper's voice came through his earbud, clear and calm. 3 battalions of Earth Marines, 2 cadres of Imperial Guard, and enough undercover operatives to staff a small intelligence agency. "They are expecting trouble," Elias said. "They are planning it," Vesper corrected. They reached the security checkpoint for the diplomatic wing. A scanner swept over them. Elias held his breath. The forged IDs were masterpieces of coding, courtesy of Dr. Thorne, who was currently sweating through his shirt in a maintenance van in the lower docking bay, monitoring their progress. The scanner chimed. "Green light." "Welcome, Commander," the guard said, bored. "The summit begins in 1 hour." Elias nodded, stepping through. "We wouldn't miss it." Once they were clear of the checkpoint, they ducked into a service alcove lined with hydroponic ferns. Elias pulled a small scanner from his sleeve and swept the area. "Clean," he said. Vesper deactivated her energy veil. Her face was pale, her silver eyes burning with a focused intensity. "I accessed the local grid while we walked. The layout has been altered. The main ventilation shafts to the council chamber have been sealed with military-grade blast shutters." "Why seal the vents?" Elias asked. "To keep something in," Vesper said. "Or to keep us out. But I found something else. A power spike in the structural supports beneath the podium." Elias looked at the schematic on his datapad. "That is load-bearing. If that goes, the entire platform collapses," Vesper finished. "Into the reactor core below. It would look like a catastrophic structural failure caused by a resonance weapon. An Ethelgard resonance weapon. A false flag," Elias realized, a cold knot forming in his stomach. "They aren't just going to fake a report. They are going to blow up the station. They are going to kill the delegates, the press, and themselves if they have to, just to make it look like an alien first strike." "It creates instant martyrs," Vesper said, "and instant war." "We need to split up," Elias said. "I have to get to the server room and plant the broadcast worm. If we don't get the truth out before the explosion, nobody will believe us. The narrative will be set in stone and blood." "And the bomb?" Vesper asked. "I can't disarm it and hack the network at the same time," Elias said. "Thorne is good, but he needs a hardline connection to upload the evidence file. That means I need to physically slot the drive into the main core." "I will handle the threat," Vesper said. "I will find the detonator team." "Vesper," Elias said. She stopped. She looked at him. The service alcove was small, smelling of damp earth and fertilizer. It was a quiet, green pocket in a station built of steel and lies. "This is it," Elias said softly. "Once we cross this line, there is no going back to the shadows. We either win, or we die as terrorists." "I know," Vesper said. She reached out and took his hand. Her fingers were cool, her grip strong. She wasn't wearing gloves. The contact was electric, a raw circuit closing between them. Elias looked at her, really looked at her. He saw the warrior who had hunted him on the ice. He saw the aristocrat who had danced with him in the storm. And he saw the woman who had jumped in front of a grenade because she decided that living without him wasn't living at all. "I used to think I was broken," Elias whispered. "That I was just a gun with a heartbeat. I didn't think I had anything left to give anyone." "You gave me a choice," Vesper said. She stepped closer, invading his personal space, reclaiming it. "You gave me a conscience." "You always had it," Elias said. "You just needed permission to use it." He raised his hand to her face, his thumb brushing the sharp line of her cheekbone. She leaned into his touch, her eyes closing for a brief second. It was a surrender of control that was more terrifying to her than any blade. "If we don't make it," Elias said, his voice rough. "We will," Vesper interrupted. She opened her eyes. They were fierce. "But if we do not..." She grabbed the lapels of his uniform and pulled him down. She didn't kiss him on the mouth. Instead, she pressed her forehead against his, hard. It was a collision of minds, a desperate grounding. They breathed the same air, sharing the terrifying intimacy of two people who had seen the worst of the universe and still found something worth saving in each other. "I am with you," she whispered against his skin. "In the dark, in the light, in the fire." "In the fire," Elias echoed. They held the moment for 3 heartbeats, long enough to memorize the weight of it, long enough to build a fortress out of it. Then they pulled apart. The masks slid back into place. The operator and the assassin returned. But the air between them had changed. It was no longer just a partnership. It was a gravity well. "Go," Vesper commanded. "Plant the worm. I will clear the path." She turned and vanished into the shadows of the corridor. Elias watched her go for a fraction of a second, then turned and ran toward the server core. The server core of the Helios station was a fortress within a fortress. It was a towering silo of blue light and humming cooling fans, guarded by a squad of elite corporate security. Elias didn't have time for stealth. He rounded the corner, his pistol drawn. "Federal inspection," he shouted, flashing a badge that didn't exist. "We have a report of a thermal leak in this sector. Clear the room." The guards hesitated. That hesitation was all Elias needed. He fired 2 stun rounds into the chest of the lead guard. As the man crumpled, Elias sprinted forward, sliding across the polished floor. He kicked the legs out from under the second guard and pistol-whipped the third. It was messy. It was loud. It was effective. He reached the main console and slammed a jamming device onto the lock. The door hissed open. "Thorn!" Elias shouted into his comms. "I am in! Get the upload ready!" "I am trying," Thorn's voice crackled, sounding panicked. "But the encryption on their firewall is adaptive. It is fighting me. Elias, it knows we are here." "Just punch a hole in it," Elias yelled, typing furiously at the terminal. He pulled the data drive, the black prism key, from his pocket and slotted it into the port. "I am initiating the hardline transfer." "Elias," Thorn said, "I am reading movement in your sector. A lot of movement." "I know," Elias said, watching the security monitors. "I just kicked the hornet's nest." 3 levels above, Vesper moved through the backstage rigging of the Grand Assembly Hall. Below her, the delegates were taking their seats. She could see the Earth ambassador smoothing his notes. She could see the Ethelgard Archon sitting in stony silence. And she could see the team in the maintenance catwalks directly under the podium. They were not maintenance workers. They were wearing stealth suits with no insignia. They were arming a device that thrummed with a low, dissonant frequency. Vesper dropped from the rigging. She landed silently behind the rearmost saboteur. Before he could turn, she snapped his neck. He fell without a sound. She moved to the second man. He sensed the air displacement and spun around, raising a silenced pistol. Vesper deflected his arm, the shot going wild, and drove her palm into his solar plexus. The armor crunched. He went down. "Intruder!" The third man shouted. The rest of the team turned. There were 6 of them. Vesper drew her stolen phase blade. The violet energy hummed, casting long shadows against the metal grating. "Step away from the device," she said. A figure stepped out from the shadows behind the saboteurs. He was tall, wearing the armor of an Aethelguard shadow marshal, obsidian plate etched with silver runes. He removed his helmet. Vesper froze. It was Vorian, the weapon master who had trained her. The man who had taught her that pain was just information and mercy was a malfunction. "I smelled you, Vesper," Vorian said. His voice was like grinding stones. "You carry the stink of the human." "I carry the truth," Vesper said, shifting her stance. "Stand down, Vorian. The bomb kills everyone, and even you." "A necessary sacrifice," Vorian said, drawing a dual-bladed staff that crackled with red lightning. "To cleanse the galaxy of the weak, we must burn the bridges. You have forgotten the first lesson. The strong define the shape of the universe." "The strong protect the universe," Vesper countered. "The weak burn it because they are afraid of what they cannot control." "You are infected," Vorian sneered. "Compromised by sentiment. I will excise the rot." He lunged. The duel was a blur of violence. Vorian was stronger, his blows shaking the catwalk. Vesper was faster, but she was fighting defensively, trying to keep him away from the detonator. His staff swept low, aiming for her legs. Vesper leaped, pushing off a support beam to strike from above. Vorian caught her blade on his staff, the energy discharge blinding them both for a second. He kicked her in the chest, sending her skidding backward toward the edge of the drop. "You fight like a human now," Vorian mocked, advancing. "Sloppy, emotional." Vesper wiped blood from her lip. She looked at the bomb. The timer read 2 minutes. "I fight like a human," she said, standing up. She sheathed her blade. Vorian paused, confused. Vesper pulled a flashbang grenade from her belt, human tech, and pulled the pin. "Good," she said. She dropped it at his feet. Vorian roared, shielding his eyes, but the blast disoriented him. His auditory sensors overloaded. Vesper didn't use an elegant form. She didn't use a grand strike. She tackled him. She drove her shoulder into his gut, driving him back, until his knees hit the railing. She punched him in the throat, then grabbed his armor and threw him over the edge. He fell into the reactor coolant darkness below, his scream cut short by the roar of the turbines. Vesper turned to the bomb. "Thorn!" she gasped. "I have the device. It is a resonance charge. How do I kill it?" "You can't cut the wires," Thorn shouted over the comms. "It is tamper-proof. You have to disrupt the signal receiver." Vesper looked at the device. It was shielded. She raised her fist, channeling all the power of her exosuit into a single, kinetic strike. She smashed the receiver. The timer froze at 11 seconds. "Bomb neutral," Vesper said, sagging against the railing. "Elias, talk to me." "I am a little busy," Elias shouted. The server room was under siege. Security forces were cutting through the door. Sparks showered down on him as he typed. "Upload is at 90%, Thorn yelled. "Hold them off, Elias!" The door gave way. A dozen soldiers poured in, weapons raised. "Freeze!" the captain screamed. "Step away from the console." Elias didn't step away. He hit the execute key. Done, he shouted. He threw his hands up, turning to face the guns. Don't shoot! I am surrendering, but you might want to check your news feeds first. In the Grand Assembly Hall, the Earth Ambassador had just stepped up to the podium. Distinguished delegates, he began, his voice amplified across the station. We gather here under the shadow of a great threat, the alien aggression. The massive holographic screens behind him flickered. The seal of the Earth Coalition vanished. Static roared through the speakers. Then, a voice cut through the noise. It was the voice of the dead scientist, Dr. Aris Thorne. My name is Aris Thorne. I was the lead researcher at Outpost Typhon. I am speaking to you from the grave because the people standing on that stage killed me. A gasp went through the hall. The ambassador froze. The screens shifted. They showed documents, emails, bank transfers. Here is the kill order, Thorne's voice narrated. Signed by the Committee of 12. Here's the payment to the rogue Ethelgard faction. And here. The screen changed to a video file. It was the recording from the Typhon Lab security cameras. It showed the Earth tech equipment on the alien assassins. It showed the clean execution. They didn't kill us to stop an invasion, Thorne said. They killed us to steal a key that would let them turn off the warp gates and starve your worlds. Pandemonium erupted. Delegates were shouting. The Ethelgard Archons stood up, their weapons drawing instantly. The Earth Ambassador looked around wildly, realizing his script had just turned into an indictment. Cut the feed, he screamed. Cut it now! In the maintenance van, Dr. Thorne watched the chaos on his monitors. He smiled. He looked at the upload bar. It was green. The truth was out. It was replicating across 1,000 independent nodes. It couldn't be stopped. The rear doors of the van blew open. Thorne didn't turn around. He knew who it was. The strike team had found him. Worth it, he whispered. A burst of gunfire silenced the van. Dr. Thorne slumped over the console, his hand still resting on the send key. Thorne is gone, Elias said. His voice was hollow. He saw the biosignal flatline on his HUD. He was on his knees in the server room, hands behind his head. The soldiers were confused, looking at their own tactical displays which were now streaming the evidence of their own superior's treason. Captain, one of the soldiers said, lowering his rifle. Sir, look at this. The orders. They came from command. The captain looked at the screen. He looked at Elias. Get up, the captain said quietly. Excuse me? Elias asked. There is chaos in the hall, the captain said. Security containment has collapsed. If you run now, my team will be looking the other way. Elias stood up. He looked at the soldier. Why? Because I didn't sign up to be a butcher, the captain said. Go! Elias didn't waste time. He sprinted out the back exit, heading for the rendezvous point. Vesper rappelled down from the catwalks directly onto the stage of the assembly hall. She landed in a crouch, her phase blade glowing. The room went silent. The security detail raised their weapons, but nobody fired. The image of the massacre was still playing on the giant screens behind her. Vesper stood up. She ripped the veil from her face. She looked directly into the camera drone hovering above the panicked crowd. Her voice was amplified by the station's acoustics, and it was calm, royal, and absolutely terrifying. You look for monsters, she said. You look at my skin and you see a threat. You look at his uniform. She pointed at the Earth Ambassador, who was cowering behind his podium. And you see safety. She stepped forward. The ambassador flinched. Morality is not a flag, Vesper declared. It is not inherited by blood, and it is not granted by an empire. It is chosen. It is a price you pay. She looked at the Ethelgard Archons. I paid for mine with my rank. I paid for it with my exile. She looked at the camera. The war you were promised is a lie. The enemy is not across the border. The enemy is in the room with you. She threw a smoke canister at her feet. As the gray cloud billowed out, she vanished into the confusion. Elias and Vesper met in the maintenance spine of Sector 4. They were both battered. Vesper's robes were torn, revealing the combat suit beneath. Elias was bleeding from a cut on his forehead. They didn't stop to hug. They ran. The station was in lockdown, but the chaos was their ally. Half the security forces were arresting the other half. The delegates were fleeing. The false flag bomb sat inert beneath the stage, a silent testimony to the catastrophe they had averted. They reached the airlock where they had stashed emergency EVA suits. "Thorn?" Vesper asked as she sealed her helmet. "Dead," Elias said, his voice flat. "He made sure the signal got out. He bought us the future." "Then we do not waste it," Vesper said. They cycled the airlock and stepped out into the void. They moved along the exterior hull of the station, using magnetic grapples. Below them, the galaxy spun, vast and indifferent. "Where do we go?" Vesper asked. Her voice came over the comms, tinny and distant. "We are traitors to Earth. We are heretics to the Empire. Half the bounty hunters in the sector will be looking for us by morning." Elias looked at her, in the vacuum, reflecting the starlight. She looked like a constellation given form. "We go to the fringe," Elias said. "We go where the maps stop. The signal is out. Vesper. The narrative is fractured. People are asking questions when we just have to stay alive long enough for the answer to take root." "A fugitive life," Vesper mused. "Inefficient, dangerous, unstable." "Better than a comfortable lie," Elias said. He reached out and grabbed her hand, their bulky EVA gloves locking together. "Ready to disappear?" he asked. Vesper looked back at the station, then at the stars. "I am ready to be found," she said. "By anyone brave enough to look?" They released the maglocks and pushed off, drifting into the dark, not falling but flying toward a horizon that belonged only to them. The war had been stopped, but the fight was just beginning. The galaxy did not end with a bang. It ended with a notification. The upload from the Helios ring station had hit the interstellar comms network like a kinetic strike. Within 6 hours, the footage of the Typhon massacre was playing on screens from the glitzy orbital spires of Terra Prime to the sludge-mining colonies of the Outer Rim. The truth did not set anyone free. It set them on fire. On Earth, the streets of Geneva were choked with protesters. They carried holograms of the dead scientists and burned effigies of the committee members. Corporate headquarters were barricaded, their private security forces overwhelmed by the sheer crushing weight of public rage. In the Ethelgard Empire, the fracture was cleaner but bloodier. The royal court was in civil war. Younger archons, tired of the endless stagnation and the secret dealings with human oligarchs, turned their blades on the old guard. The silence of the void was broken by the screams of a dynasty consuming itself. Elias Rane watched it all from the corner of a dimly lit noodle bar on a habitat called the Rust Bucket. It was a fitting name. The station orbited a brown dwarf star in the middle of nowhere, a collection of welded scrap metal held together by duct tape and prayers. "Look at them," Elias said, gesturing with a plastic fork at the newsfeed projected above the counter. "We broke the world. Vesper, I hope you are proud." Vesper sat opposite him. She was wearing a mechanic's jumpsuit she had stolen from a laundry line. The sleeves rolled up to reveal the sleek, deadly geometry of her arms. She did not look at the screen. She was looking at the small black prism sitting on the sticky table between them. The key, the source of all the blood. "We did not break it," Vesper said, her voice low. We just turned on the lights. The cracks were already there. Fair point, Elias muttered. He took a bite of synthetic noodles. They tasted like wet cardboard in victory. So, the 64 trillion credit question. What do we do with the magic box? It was the debate they had been having for 2 days. The prism contained the access codes to the deep network. It was the power to move fleets instantly, to strangle economies, to rewrite the map of the galaxy. Destroy it, Vesper said. It was the soldier's answer. Throw it into the station's reactor. End the temptation. If we destroy it, Elias countered, the secret dies with us, but the math doesn't. Someone else will figure it out eventually. Aerodyne Systems, the Imperial Science Guild, and next time, there won't be a conscience like Dr. Thorne to hide it. They will weaponize it from day one. Then give it to the Coalition, Vesper suggested. The Oversight Committee, the same coalition that is currently eating itself? Elias shook his head. Giving this to a government is like giving a loaded gun to a toddler and hoping they only shoot the bad guys. Power corrupts. Vesper. Absolute power just corrupts faster. Then we keep it, Vesper said. We vanish. We guard it. We can't run forever, Elias said. Look at the feed. He tapped the table. The channel changed. A new broadcast appeared. It was an official decree from the High Court of the Ethelgard. Vesper's face appeared on the screen. It was a high-resolution image from her service file. Terrifying and beautiful. Wanted for high treason. The text read in jagged alien script. The apostate Vesper. Kill on sight. Reward. Planetary governorship. Vesper stared at her own face. The apostate, she whispered. They have stripped me of my house. My name is erased from the songs. You are famous, Elias said softly. That is better than being a song. It means every hunter in the sector is coming, Vesper said. We cannot hide. As if summoned by her words, the air in the noodle bar changed. It wasn't a sound. It was a pressure drop. The murmur of the patrons died down. The cook in the back stopped chopping. Elias felt the hair on his arm stand up. He knew that feeling. It was the feeling of a target lock. Back door? Vesper asked, not moving her lips. Blocked, Elias said, glancing at the reflection in his spoon. 2 heat signatures just set up by the waste disposal output. Front door? 3 entering now, Elias said. Heavy armor, Earth Tech cloaking fields, expensive. The door to the bar slid open. 3 figures stepped in. They were not standard military. They wore the matte black featureless armor of the Shadow Directorate, the elite, wet work squad that officially did not exist. They moved with the synchronized liquid grace of predators. The lead figure scanned the room. His helmet turned toward their booth. Elias Rane, a digitized voice boomed. Vesper of the House of Night. Remain seated. Any movement will be met with immediate amputation. Elias sighed. He put down his fork. You know, he said loudly, addressing the room. I was just saying the service here is terrible, but this is ridiculous. The patrons scrambled. Chairs overturned as scavengers and spacers dove for cover. Secure the target, the leader commanded. Vesper, Elias said calmly. Plan C. We have a Plan C? Vesper asked, her hand drifting toward the phase blade concealed in her boot. It is a work in progress, Elias admitted. Flip the table. Vesper kicked the underside of the heavy metal table. It tore loose from the bolts and flipped upright, providing a makeshift shield just as the air filled with suppressed plasma fire. Thwip, thwip, thwip. Molten holes appeared in the metal inches from Elias's face. Unorthodox tactics, Elias yelled. He pulled a small silver sphere from his pocket, a gravity distortion grenade he had looted from the summit. He didn't throw it at the soldiers. He rolled it across the floor toward the open kitchen. "Fire in the hole!" The grenade detonated. It didn't explode, it imploded. It created a localized gravity well for 3 seconds. Every pot, pan, knife, and vat of boiling broth in the kitchen was sucked into a swirling vortex of metal and soup, then violently expelled outward when the field collapsed. A wave of hot broth and cutlery slammed into the soldiers. It wasn't lethal, but it was confusing, messy, and humiliating. The leader stumbled, his visor covered in synthetic grease. "Move!" Elias shouted. He and Vesper broke cover, sprinting for the side window. Vesper shattered the glass with her shoulder, and they tumbled out into the rain-slicked alleyway of the Habitat's market district. "Soup?" Vesper asked as they ran, her boots splashing in the grime. "That was your tactic." "They are elite soldiers," Elias panted. "They train for flashbangs and EMPs. They don't train for flying cutlery. You have to disrupt their OODA loop." "My OODA loop is also disrupted," Vesper noted. They turned a corner and skidded to a halt. Blocking the alley was a second squad, but these weren't human. They were Ethelgard Reavers, wielding energy pikes. And behind them, blocking the retreat, the human squad was catching up. "Pinned," Elias said. "Checkmate." "Not yet," Vesper said. Her eyes locked on something behind the Reavers. A group of civilians, refugees from the Typhon sector, were huddled in a doorway, trapped in the crossfire. A mother clutched 2 children. The Reavers were ignoring them, but their firing lines were careless. "Surrender the key!" the human leader shouted, wiping broth from his helmet. "And we will grant you a quick death." One of the Reavers raised a heavy plasma cannon. He wasn't aiming at Elias. He was aiming at the structure behind them to collapse the escape route. The shot would incinerate the refugees. Vesper saw the geometry. She saw the calculus of loss. "Elias," she said, "take the key." She shoved the black prism into his hand. "What are you doing?" Elias demanded. "Proving a point," Vesper said. She didn't attack. She sprinted away from Elias, placing herself directly between the heavy cannon and the civilian family. She activated her personal shield when it was damaged, flickering, barely holding a charge. "Fire!" the Reaver commanded. The plasma bolt screamed through the air. Vesper didn't flinch. She stood tall, arms spread, a shield of flesh and willpower. The bolt hit her energy barrier. The impact was blinding. The shield flared violet and shattered. Vesper was thrown backward, skidding across the pavement, smoke rising from her armor. But the blast was absorbed. The civilians were untouched. The alley went silent. The Reavers paused. The logic of the battlefield had just been violated. An assassin protecting collateral damage. It did not compute. Elias didn't waste the silence. He raised his pistol, not to fire, but to shoot the steam valve directly above the Reavers. A jet of superheated steam blasted down. The aliens roared, scattering. Elias ran to Vesper. She was scorched, her breathing shallow, but she was conscious. He hauled her up. "You have a hero complex," he growled, half carrying her. "Civilians," Vesper gasped. "They are not variables." Yeah. Saint Vesper of the alleyway. Come on." They limped into the old maintenance lift and slammed the gate. Elias hit the button for the upper spire. The lift shuddered upward. Elias checked Vesper's vitals on his scanner. Rib fractures. Thermal burns. She was running on adrenaline and stubbornness. "Why the upper spire?" Vesper asked, leaning against the rusty mesh. "There is no exit there." "We aren't exiting," Elias said. "We are finishing this. The signal tracing indicates the command frequency for these squads is coming from a private yacht docked at the pinnacle." The mastermind, Vesper realized. "They came to watch the show," Elias said. "Let's give them a front row seat." The yacht was sleek, white and obscene against the rust of the station. It sat on the private landing pad, surrounded by automated turrets. Elias didn't use stealth. He walked right up to the camera. "Tell Vance I have the package," he said to the lens, "and tell him I am tired of running." The turrets powered down. The airlock ramp lowered. They walked inside. The interior was all white leather and chrome. Standing in the center of the lounge, holding a glass of real wine, was Director Vance. Beside him stood a tall Ethel guard, his robe shimmering with the iridescent weave of a high prince. "Elias," Vance smiled, looking like a disappointed father. "You look terrible. Is that soup on your coat?" "It's a tactical garnish," Elias said. He helped Vesper to a chair, then turned to face the men. "Director Vance and Prince. Kalen, I assume?" "You are well informed," the prince said. His voice was smooth like oil on glass. "For a primitive..." "We had a good teacher," Vesper said, her voice raspy. "Dr. Thorne left extensive notes." "A tragedy," Vance sighed. "Thorne was brilliant but unstable. He didn't understand the big picture." "The picture where you two run the galaxy?" Elias asked. "You staged the massacre, you staged the war, all so you could seize the network and become the gatekeepers of civilization. Order requires control, Elias," Vance said, stepping forward. "Look at the chaos out there. The riots, the burning cities. The people are terrified. They don't want freedom. They want safety. They want to know that the trains run on time and the warp gates open when they are supposed to." Vance gestured to the prince. "Our alliance ensures that stability. Earth and Ethelgard, united by a shared infrastructure. No more wars. Just management. Management by fear," Vesper said. "Fear works," Prince Kalen said. "It is the only universal language." Vance put his drink down. "Here is the offer. Elias, you give us the key. We wipe your records. We restore your rank. You get a pension, a nice house on Mars, and silence. Vesper gets reinstated. Her house is restored. We blame the massacre on a rogue splinter group, execute a few patsies, and the galaxy goes back to sleep." He held out his hand. "Come back to the chain of command. Elias, it's cold out there in the dark." Elias looked at the hand. It was manicured, clean. He looked at Vesper. She was battered, bleeding, and labeled a traitor, but her eyes were clear. Elias looked back at Vance. "You know," Elias said, "I used to think the chain of command was what held the world together, but I realized something on the ice." "And what is that?" Vance asked. "Chains are just for dogs," Elias said, "and I am not your dog anymore." He pulled the black prism from his pocket. "Don't!" Kalen shouted, his composure breaking. Elias didn't smash it. He didn't throw it. He tossed it to Vesper. Vesper caught it. She plugged it into the yacht's own communication console, which she had been quietly hot-wiring while Elias talked. "What are you doing?" Vance screamed. "Security!" "Too late," Vesper said. Her fingers danced over the holographic keys. "We debated what to do with the technology. Director? Destroy it? Hide it? We decided on a third path," Elias said, drawing his pistol to cover the door. "We are releasing it," Vesper said. "No, but not the weapon." She hit the final command. "Dr. Thorne built a partition," Vesper explained, her voice gaining strength. "He separated the transit protocols from the control overrides. We just uploaded the transit mathematics to the public domain. Every university, every independent trader, every colony in the galaxy just got the blueprints for the deep network." Vance turned pale. You gave it away?" "We democratized it." Elias grinned. "Now everyone has the keys to the highway. You can't hold the galaxy hostage if everyone knows the shortcut." And the weapon protocols? Kalen demanded. The override codes? Vesper held up the prism. It was glowing red. Deleting, she said. The prism sparked, sizzled, and went dark. The hardware fused. The weapon was gone. You fools, Vance whispered, sinking onto a sofa. Do you have any idea what you have done? You have created anarchy, without us to control it. Without you to control it, Elias said. People will have to figure it out for themselves. It will be messy. It will be loud. But it will be theirs. The yacht's alarms began to blare. Not intruder alarms, docking alarms. Local law enforcement. Elias checked his wrist unit. I tipped them off that a high-value unregistered vessel was in the bay. They are looking for bribes, but they will find 2 war criminals instead. You can't prove anything, Vance spat. The yacht's internal sensors just recorded your confession, Vesper said, standing up. And I just live-streamed it to the news feed. Elias offered Vesper his arm. Shall we go? We shall, she said. They walked past the stunned masterminds, out of the airlock, and into the waiting chaos. The weeks that followed were a blur of tribunals and treaties. The exposure of the Vance-Kalen conspiracy did not magically fix the universe, but it stopped the bleeding. The war fleet stood down, confused and demoralized. The Committee of 12 was dissolved, its members facing public trials that would drag on for a decade. The Ethelgard Empire fractured into a dozen independent states, some reforming, others isolating, but the monolithic threat was gone. The release of the deep network data triggered a golden age of exploration. Small trade ships could now navigate the void as easily as corporate freighters. The monopoly was broken, prices dropped, colonies flourished. It was messy. Pirates used the new routes too. Smugglers thrived, but it was free. Elias and Vesper sat on a seawall on a quiet, terraformed ocean world called Haven. The sun was setting, painting the water in shades of violet and gold. They were no longer wearing armor. Elias wore a loose linen shirt and trousers, looking less like a ghost and more like a man who was finally getting some sleep. Vesper wore a simple tunic, her feet bare, dangling over the water. They were still wanted in 12 systems, but the pursuit had lost its teeth. They were heroes to half the galaxy and terrorists to the other half, which meant most people just left them alone. I received a message, Vesper said, watching the waves. From a remnant of my house, they offered me amnesty. If I return and perform the rite of contrition, I can be reinstated. Elias felt a cold spike in his chest. He looked at her. And I told them the rite of contrition involves kneeling, Vesper said, and my knees are bad from the damp. Elias let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. He laughed. Bad knees. I will remember that one. It is a valid medical excuse, she said, a small smile playing on her lips. She turned to him. The silver in her eyes had softened. It wasn't the cold, predatory gleam anymore. It was the reflection of the stars. And you? She asked. Vance's successor offered you a contract, independent consultant, triple pay. I told him I was retired, Elias said. I told him I had a prior commitment. To what? To a partner, Elias said. High maintenance, argumentative, eats terrible noodles. Vesper leaned her shoulder against his. It was a casual gesture, but it carried the weight of everything they had survived. We are not safe here, you know, she said. Someone will come eventually. Let them come, Elias said. He reached down and took her hand, his fingers interlaced with hers, calloused skin against cool, alien strength. We have faced fleets and assassins. I think we can handle a few bounty hunters. It will be hard, Vesper said. Living without orders. Having to choose every day who we want to be. That is the job, Elias said. Love isn't a fairy tale, Vesper. It isn't a sunset. It's a daily act. It's waking up every morning and deciding to cover your back, even when I'm angry at you. It's choosing to be better than the systems that made us. Vesper looked at their joined hands. 2 weapons, deactivated. 2 soldiers, AWOL. I am willing to do the work, she whispered. Me too, Elias said. He leaned in and kissed her. It was slow, deliberate, and tasted of salt spray and freedom. It was a kiss that didn't promise a happy ending, but promised a real one. They stood up as the sun dipped below the horizon. They turned their backs on the ocean, on the flags, on the titles. Where to next? Vesper asked. Elias checked his pockets. I have a half-credit chip and a map to a moon where they brew beer from moss. Inefficient, Vesper said, smiling. Lead the way. They walked away into the deepening twilight, side by side, equals in a universe they had helped rewrite. They were still dangerous. They were still sarcastic. But as their silhouettes faded into the night, they were, for the first time in their lives, entirely free.